Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited about tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Cheryl Benton. I'm the founder and publisher of The Three Tomatoes. And The Three Tomatoes is a lifestyle guide for grown up women. We actually have a very robust website and several newsletters a week. And we cover everything that smart, savvy, grown up women care about, everything from style, fashion, food, travel, health, books, entertainment. And I think you'll find it fun and informative. And it's free to sign up for our newsletters, and you can do that at the3tomatoes.com. And I'm so excited to have so many of you here for this book event. I was telling Jean earlier, we actually started our book events during the pandemic, and I think this is about this. I think this is the sixth one we've done, and it's all been with authors of their books, and it's been really special to hear from all of them. And I am just so delighted and honored to have Jean Becke with us tonight. And by the way, I'm still letting people in. And let me tell you a little bit about Jean. Jean is was the chief of staff to President George H.W. Bush during his post-presidency for 24 years. Starting in 1994, she supervised his offices in both Houston and Kennebunkport, Maine, up until his death in 2018. She also worked to set up his presidential library, and she had the challenge, and as she says, the great honor of being in charge of his state funeral. And prior to that, though, she spent 3 years in the East Wing during Bush number 41's presidency, where she served as the deputy press secretary for First Lady Barbara Bush. And by the way, I wore my little pearls today in honor of Mrs. Bush. I should have had more strands. Um, and she also helped Mrs. Bush with the editing and research for her books, Barbara Bush, A Memoir and Reflections. And in her new book, let me show it to you all if you haven't already gotten it. It's called The Man I Knew, The Amazing Story of George H.W. Bush's Post-Presidency. And I have to tell you, it is such a beautifully written book. It is so inspiring. It's a moving tribute to really a remarkable man. I mean, we know him as an American hero. We know him as a president, but most of us do not know this side of this man and the story that Jean's tell. And I have to tell you, it's told with warmth and such humor and such love. And I laughed and I cried. And it's just, I can't thank you enough, Jean, for bringing this really amazing man that you knew to all of us. And you really do. As Jean says, she had a ringside seat to his never boring life. And she brings in the book, she brings us all right in there. We feel like we're in that ringside with her, and it's like being a fly on the wall. So, Jean, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. So, first of
Cheryl,
all, do you want to talk about your drinking contest?
yes, I do. But first of all, I've been the book came out June 1st. So what this would make this week 6 or 7 on the book tour. Most of it's been virtual, a few in-person things. This was the best introduction I've had. I'm going to take you on the road with me. That
Good,
was a
I'm
great
ready.
introduction. So for all of you who it's a summer evening in July. I'm so honored that you decided to spend your summer evening with Cheryl and me, and particularly for my friends and family who are on this call. For some of them, this is their 30th book event. So we're gonna make this fun tonight. Everybody's supposed to have a glass of wine. Here's mine. I'm drinking a barefoot spritzer. It's very good. Every time you hear either Cheryl or I say the word idea, take a drink. So we're going to practice right now. I hope you all like my idea. Oh, okay.
Oh,
And I told Cheryl I would never ever promote this idea if this weren't a virtual event. But I'm already assuming that you're all home in your living room and no one is driving after this event. So
Exactly. So
Um,
thank you. We can just roll right into bed after this.
exactly.
So before we start talking about the book, I love hearing women's stories, and I love women to tell the stories of how they got to where they are. And you have such an interesting background. So tell us what your background was, how you found your way into the East Wing of the White House, and then how you became chief of staff to President Bush after he left office.
You all are looking at the luckiest person in the world. I grew up on a farm in mid Missouri. My graduating high school class was 57 people. My dad never even graduated from high school. He was one of the smartest people I knew, but he was not educated, really smart man. So I go to the University of Missouri School of Journalism, and I get a newspaper job, which was my dream to be a reporter. And after two newspaper jobs, I managed to land at USA Today, which was my big break. I was so happy. I was so excited. And for the 1988 election, USA Today, I was a member of their election team. And of the many assignments I had that year, Barbara Bush and Kitty Dukakis agreed to write a column for USA Today every Monday in, in September and October. It was started behind the scenes of the campaign trail. And with Kitty Dukakis, I worked with her press secretary. But Barbara Bush cut out the middleman and she wanted to deal with me directly. She turned her column into me every Monday night, and I would always have to, Sunday night, I would have to cut it. It was always too long. So I would work with her on what we're going to cut. And so I got to know her really well, but I was really surprised after the election when her chief of staff offered me a job in her press office. Among other things, Cheryl, I grew up a Democrat. I was pretty apolitical at that point, but anyway, I went to the East Wing to be a member of one of her deputy press secretaries. So then, okay, the end of the story, President Bush loses the election. I go to Houston with them to help her with her memoirs. She wrote them herself, but she needed an editor. She needed a researcher. She just needed a girl Friday. So she asked me to go with her to Houston. And off I went. I was very excited. And the book was getting ready to come out in March of 94. I had a job interview with the Chicago Sun-Times to go back to reporting. I was very excited. And this might have been the first time that George Bush called me into his office. I'd gotten to know him a little bit during that year. And he said, Jean, I have an idea.
Oh,
Right? So his chief of staff, post White House chief of staff, Rosa Maria, was getting ready to retire. She had told him she would do it for 1 year. The year was up. And President Bush said to me, I have no idea who to hire. I need to think this through. I really don't know who to call. He said, Barbara thinks it would be helpful if you could just stay and keep the seat warm. And I told him I didn't know how to be chief of staff. I says, I've never been in charge of anything. I've never been anyone's boss. I can hear my sister Melly, who's on here, laughing because she thinks I'm now very bossy. But I said to him, I don't know how to be a boss. I've never done a budget. And he said, don't worry about any of that. Just help us out where you can. And I promise you by Labor Day, I will hire a permanent chief of staff. Cheryl, we never talked about it again. That was it. We were too busy. I think 20 years later, I said to him, are you still looking for a chief of staff? And he said, what are you talking about? So I reminded him of that conversation. He didn't remember it, but
yes, you were probably the world's longest acting chief of
acting
staff,
chief of staff.
right?
Yes, I
24
think I
years,
was.
right?
Yeah.
I love that. It's such a great story. So, as we know, President Bush lost the 1992 election to Bill Clinton, and the first chapter in your book is titled The Morning After, and it describes what a really devastating loss this was for him. And I would love you to read those first couple of pages and also the now very famous letter that he left in the Oval Office for Bill Clinton.
Well, and thank you, Cheryl. Again, this is the 30th event I think I've done, and no one ever asked me to read from the book. So thank you. So this is the
It was
very
a great
beginning.
idea.
Is it what a oh, okay.
Okay.
So this is how the book begins, except for the preface. The morning after, George H.W. Bush once said to a friend who was bemoaning the fact he'd been fired, "I know how you feel. I was fired by the American people. It hurt." And then he told his friend that it would be okay. As it turned out, for the 41st President of the United States, it really was okay, but because he made it so. But it was not easy. President Bush could never really describe how it felt to go literally overnight from being the most important and powerful person in the world to a private citizen. You lose not only your power, but also your house, your plane, and a large devoted staff. How does it feel when the last strains of Hail to the Chief fade away? The first word that comes to mind is devastating. Just he was devastated. He was really devastated. We can talk about the first year a little bit if we want to, but it's a very
Yes.
hard transition. But the last thing that President Bush did before he left the White House on January 20th, 1993, was to leave this letter in the desk in the Oval Office for the incoming president. Dear Bill, when I walked into this office just now, I felt the same sense of wonder and respect that I felt 4 years ago. I know you will feel that too. I wish you great happiness here. I never felt the loneliness some presidents have described. There will be very tough times, made even more difficult by criticism you may not think is fair. I'm not a very good one to give advice, but don't let the critics discourage you or push you off course. You will be our president when you read this note. I wish you well. I wish your family well. Your success is now our country's success. I am rooting hard for you. Good luck, George. That's
What
just
a,
classic George
yeah.
Herbert Walker Bush.
Such a beautiful, gracious letter, especially knowing how, devastated he was by the defeat too. But such a great thing that he did in leaving that. So let's talk a little bit because you were there for that first year when he was out of office, which, as you said, it was a rocky kind of year for him trying to get his footing and figure out what he was going to do next. So tell us a little bit about that first year.
He was very quiet. I, again, was helping Mrs. Bush with her book. And this is how I really got to know him. There was no room for me in his new office in Houston, Texas. So they put me at a card table in his kitchen. Our office had two kitchens, one for everybody else, and then a tiny one for him. And that's where I sat at a card table. And he would come in the mornings and make coffee or come get a glass of milk. And because he's such an extrovert, we started visiting, and he really I did not know him at all during the White House days. I was very low on the totem pole. But as I got to know him, he was just quiet and he took his time. He was very introspective about what he wanted his post presidency to look like, Cheryl. He even wrote a memo to himself. He surprised Mrs. Bush by taking them on a princess cruise that he saw advertised on TV. They went in February of 1993, a month out of the White House. And he surprised her. I'm thinking if he had told her, she maybe would have said, honey, that may not be a great idea. Can you all imagine being on a princess cruise in February of 1993 and you're in your swimsuit and your cover up and coming down the ship's one of the walkways is George and Barbara Bush? And some man tried to take his picture when he was stark naked coming out of the shower in the gym one morning. And I think he knew that's when he knew this isn't the White House anymore. But while he was on that cruise, he literally wrote a memo to himself about how he felt about the post presidency and sort of the do's and don'ts. And Cheryl, I think you wanted me to read his four don'ts.
Yeah,
You
I
want me to?
loved his things to think about were very interesting too, and you have to read the book to find those. But he did have four things on things not to do. He was not going to do as a former president, and they're
So think.
priceless.
I love that you, because I agree with you. The to-do list is great, but the not things not to do. Get in the way of President Clinton. Be a kingmaker or try to. This means turning down a lot of political invitations. It means trying to avoid joint letter signing with former presidents on some requests. Don't cheapen the presidency. That means avoiding money grabbing. Trying to influence how history will treat me. I want to avoid the many interviews, appearances, etc., quote, to set the record straight. Those were his four don'ts. And he stuck to them. He absolutely did stick to those.
They're great. It says a lot about him just reading his don'ts. Well, throughout your book, though, you share so many stories, great stories and anecdotes, and also his writing that really shows so many times what a great sense of humor he had, and he was very often very self-deprecating as well. And while we're talking about when he things he thought about as a former president, there's a great article that, and you quote some of it in your book, that I think he wrote in 2000 for Forbes, and it was called 10 Rules for Former Presidents. So if you could share some of those, because those were terrific too.
He wrote this again in 2000 when Bill Clinton's about ready to leave the White House. And it's just a great list. And Michael Smerconish actually published this on his website on Inauguration Day this year because he thinks they're just such great advice. So here's sort of a shorthand version. Number one, get out of Dodge fast. Your history on that cold January day, be pleasant about it, smile a lot. Try not to wave at the huge inaugural crowd. They're there to see the new guy. Number two, as you fly back on Air Force One, look around. Take a shower. Grab a few napkins and some notepads and lifesavers with the presidential seal on them. Lie down on the bed in the president's cabin because 34E on the commercial airlines is quite different. When you get off Air Force One, wave from the top of the steps. A TV camera from the local station will say, "How does it feel to be home?" You say, "Great to be back." You'll hurt a little, but that will go away sooner than you might think. I'm going to skip a couple of these because we started talking about them already. When you're out walking your dog, try not to argue when you see the guy down the street who always insists on giving you his views on every issue. Oh, you got to listen, but just nod silently and don't disagree with him. When he says, "You should have invaded Cuba," smile pleasantly and try to keep moving. Play some golf, but resist telling everyone what it was like to play with Jack Nicklaus or Arnold Palmer at the course near Camp David. No one wants to know how many times you had the legends of sports to the White House. Be nice to all autograph seekers and tourists and people who interrupt your dinner. After all, some of them probably did vote for you, and those who didn't will swear that they did. Remember the 5 stay rules. Stay out of the way, out of Washington, out of the news, and away from press conferences. Stay away from bashing the national press. Stay away from most of those yellow pad think tank events, the ones where the conference proceedings are carefully written, then printed, never to be read by anyone ever again. You might want to consider the occasional World Peace Seminar in Bermuda, but be sure they get you a tea time. Stay away from saying, "Here's how I did it." You had your chance. Always count your blessings. Quietly remember the wonders of the White House. Never forget the many people that helped get you there or that work for you in the administration or the dedicated civil servants who treat the White House with such respect. Remember the majesty of the Oval Office. And as the years go by, give thanks to God for your family, your true friends, and for having given you the chance to be president of the greatest country on the face of the earth. And if by chance you have a son or daughter who has a chance to be president of the USA, ask yourself, might this really come true? Only in America.
That's so beautiful. It's great. It's great. I'm so glad you shared that in your book and that you shared that with us tonight. It just says a lot again about the man you knew and the man we're getting to know tonight. So as his chief of staff, you started really getting to know him day by day. And now we're going to get to why you created tonight's specific word for the drinking game, because you said your days would often start with President Bush saying, Jean, I have an idea.
Just hearing that again, I definitely need a drink.
Mm-hmm.
So here's
And
the
as
deal,
you write, you
Cheryl.
said those ideas could be big ideas sometimes, little
Oh my gosh.
ideas. So
He
give
would,
us a sense of what some of from the little ones to a couple of the really big ones.
so he got up at 5 o'clock every morning and he would come in around 7, and he would have had a pot of coffee. He would have read 4 newspapers, and he would come bursting into the office. I would be nursing my first cup of coffee, trying to look at emails, trying to get geared up for the day. And he would more mornings than not come in, and I could hear him say, Jean, good morning. I have an idea. Yeah, it makes me want to drink again. And sometimes they would be little ideas like, do you want to go get pizza for lunch? Let's go to Fuzzy's for lunch today. And I would be thinking to myself, oh, thank heavens, this is only about pizza. But then there was the time he said, Jean, I'm thinking I would like to start jumping out of airplanes again. He parachuted during World War II when his plane got shot down. He started wanting a do-over. He really didn't remember that parachute jump. His plane was on fire. Both of his crewmates died, which he never got over. He said he thought about them every single day, the rest of his life. And he said, I would like to do another parachute. Well, he parachuted 8 times in his post-presidency. You'll have to read the book. It was quite an adventure. Another time he came into my office, it was January 2nd. I'm thinking, let's have a slow start to the day. We'll take down the office Christmas tree. I get caught up on emails. Let's just start the new year slowly. He sits down at my desk at 7 o'clock in the morning. He says, Jean, I decided over the holidays, I want to go back to Chichijima. That is where he was shot down. He says, I haven't been back since I was shot down on September 2nd, 1944. I would like to go back. Let me just say, there's a lot about that trip in the book. It was amazing. But to get from Houston, Texas to Chichijima in the South Pacific, not easy. And what's interesting, it was the Japanese Navy who got us there. And as President Bush talked about, so the country that he was bombing, who then shot him down while he was bombing them, are the ones who are now going to take him back to that spot. But he did have some huge ideas. But do you want me to tell you about my favorite idea of his?
Yes, yes.
It's just such a great example of how he was such a big thinker, and he taught me to be a big thinker. I think bigger now than I used to. None of us will ever be the big thinker he was. So it's after Hurricane Katrina, not a little hurricane, a big hurricane called Hurricane Rita, but which no one was paying attention to. Katrina was sort of sucking the air out of the room. All the media and all the nonprofits and all the generous Americans who want to help, everyone's focused on New Orleans. And Hurricane Rita comes along and just chews up the rest of the Louisiana coastline. And somebody from a little town called Cameron, Louisiana, cold called the office. I mean, this takes a lot of guts. And I'm still friends with this man today. His name is Richard Sluslog. He calls the office and he said, look, the town in Cameron was almost level. We lost our hospital. We need help. And if we could just rebuild the emergency room, he thought people would start moving back to town. He says, people need health care. And if you can help us build our emergency room, I think that will help get the town up and running. So President Bush said, of course, we raised $2 million. And the week before Christmas, the former president of the United States is going to Cameron, Louisiana with a check for $2 million and to break ground for the new emergency room. And I showed him the schedule of events. Cheryl, it was lovely. The high school marching band was coming. The governor was coming. We were going to break ground. It was a lovely, lovely little event. And President Bush is reading the schedule and he says, Jean, this is really boring. This is boring. He said, these people have had a terrible year and they don't want to listen to speeches. We need to do something exciting for them. So I said, maybe with a little bit of attitude, just a little, I said, well, I think a former president coming to town the week before Christmas with $2 million, it's pretty exciting. It's like, no. He says, I have an idea.
And I love this idea.
He said, Jean, Barr and I have just fallen in love with this TV show. I'm not sure you've ever heard of it. You may not watch it. We watch it every night. It's called ER. And we love it. And there's this young actor, George Clooney. And he is the star of the show and he's so good. And I was thinking we should invite George Clooney to come to Cameron, Louisiana with us. He said, do you get it, Jean? ER. We're building an ER. We'll invite someone from ER. Well, Cheryl, let me count the problems with this idea. Well, I will count them while the rest of you take a drink. Number one, ER is no longer on television. The Bushes are watching it in reruns on TNT. And I would challenge any of you to explain the concept of reruns to a former president of the United States. I try to tell him the show is no longer on TV and he says, it's on every night. What are you talking about? Then I tried to tell him that George Clooney was no longer the star of this TV show. He's a huge movie star. He is in all those ocean movies. People magazine has named him the sexiest man alive. I said, sir, we don't know George Clooney. He is the biggest star out there right now. And I think his politics are a little to the left of you. I'm not sure he's going to go to Cameron, Louisiana with you the week before Christmas. And he felt I was being very negative. And we're going to show all our pictures at the end of our presentation tonight. Cheryl and I don't want to explain this, but we have a few logistical issues here. We needed some millennial help. So we're going to show pictures at the end. But to make a long story short, George Clooney came. He came. And what President Bush figured out is his good friend named Jerry Weintraub was the producer of all those ocean movies. So he called Jerry called George Clooney, and George Clooney came. And you all will have to read the book to find out why he came. And when you see the photo, he's just pretty. He just is.
And Jean, I do believe you decided to go on that trip, didn't you?
I did go on that trip, and I should not have gone on that trip because I had a terrible cold. Dr. Fauci would not have approved of me going on that trip, and that's way before we knew to wear masks in cases like that. But I had to go and be with George Clooney. And the funny thing, Cheryl, did I put this in the book? This is sort of embarrassing. I would told all my family and friends this. On the trip home, President Bush fell asleep, Jerry Weintraub fell asleep, and George Clooney's talking to me, and my ears plugged up. I could hear about every fifth or sixth word he said. So I'm just sort of nodding and agreeing with him. And to this day, I'm sticking to this story. I think he maybe was asking me out and I didn't hear it.
That's what I think. That's very sad you missed that opportunity, Jean.
Yeah.
So that was a bad idea that your ears got plugged.
A very bad idea. Anyway, that story is just a great example of President Bush was such a big thinker. And it's amazing to me how many times his ideas worked, how many times they panned out. And he always said, we'll roll the dice. If he comes, he comes. If he doesn't, what do you have to lose? And more times than
Exactly.
not, it worked out.
I love it. So, switching gears a little bit, one of the things I think we all found extraordinary to watch was his eventual friendship with his nemesis, Bill Clinton. And you refer to them in the book as the odd couple. So, tell us about this because it was a very real friendship, wasn't it?
It was a very real friendship. I still get asked about it today. A lot of people aren't sure they believe it was a real friendship. The matchmaker was the 43rd president of the United States. A horrible tsunami hit South Asia while all of us were having hopefully a lovely Christmas with our families. On Christmas Day 2004, a tsunami just devastated a big swath of South Asia. And the United States sent a ton of help, but they needed more help. And all the big nonprofit groups, Catholic Charities, Doctors Without Border, AmeriCares, of course, the Red Cross, are all headed to South Asia, but they all needed money. The need was just huge. So the president asked his dad and President Clinton to raise money in the private sector. Cheryl, our mutual friend Peggy Conlon is listening tonight. She was head of the ad council then. And I think that's when Peggy and I got to know each other because I reached out to Peggy in the ad council, who did a wonderful PSA campaign for us. So they raised a lot of money for the private sector. And then the president asked the two of them to go to all the countries to visit the heads of state on behalf of the United States and to find out how they could help. And, you know, they left on that trip as colleagues with a mission, and they came home best friends. And my theory is this: President Bush had not been diagnosed yet with Parkinson's disease, but his staff, we had noticed that he was really slowing down. He was a little unsteady on his feet. Going up and down stairs could be tricky. Getting out of a chair could be tricky. So we put a bug in President Clinton's ear because the staff needed to be out of the camera shot. So we put a bug in President Clinton's ear to keep an eye on him, to wait for him, to maybe discreetly help him, give him a hand, give him his arm. And President Clinton was amazing. He was so protective. He took that request to heart. And there are some wonderful photos showing him, waiting for him coming down the stairs. The flip side of this is President Clinton always runs late. President Bush always runs early. And President Bush, during that trip, he's the one who would say to President Clinton, Bill, quit talking, get in the car, we're leaving. And President Clinton would say, yes, sir. And I remember we were at a state dinner that the president of Sri Lanka, the prime minister of Sri Lanka was giving them. And it was time to go. And President Clinton's talking. And President Bush told me to tell his staff to pull him out of the room. And they said, oh, we don't ever pull him. He doesn't like for us to pull him. And President Bush said, I'll do it. So he wades into the crowd, taps President Clinton on the shoulder and said, Bill, get in the car. Yes, sir. So, you know, they came home. It was President Clinton had become the protective son, and President Bush had become the disciplinarian father. And Mrs. Bush absolutely thought that President Bush was the father President Clinton never had. Oh, you're on mute, Cheryl.
The famous words of this year, you're on mute, right? I just said it's such a beautiful, beautiful story,
It really
and a
is.
very touching one too. And it's really nice to know that was a true meaningful friendship too. But there was another very unlikely friendship in your book that I think probably very few people knew about, and I'm not even sure you knew about it until later. And that was with Geraldine Ferraro, who was his VP opponent in the 1984 election. And also, that was the time when Mrs. Bush famously said she was a word that rhymed with rich, right? So there was a
Yes.
lot of controversy going on. So
There's a
tell us
lot of
about that friendship. Yeah.
there was a lot of controversy during that 1984 race. And President Bush would tell you it was very hard. She was the first woman to be on a major party ticket. And President Bush said getting ready for their one and only debate was complicated because he knew that if he came on too strong, he might be called overbearing and sexist. But he also knew that if he went a little lighter, if he sort of tiptoed around her, he could also be called sexist. And you know what? She can handle it. Why are you treating her with kid gloves? So it was a complicated race. Mrs. Bush made it more complicated when she blew off to the White House press corps on the back of the plane one day. She was really mad at Geraldine Ferraro. And she says, I won't tell you what I want to call her, but it rhymes with rich. Oh boy. So what happens is after the election, President Bush invited Geraldine Ferraro to lunch at the vice president's house. And he said, bring with you the person who played me when you were getting ready for the debates. Who played me? Who filled in for me? And I will invite the person who filled in for you. And I looked it up because I knew I couldn't remember. Ferraro brought her friend and Democratic consultant Bob Barnett, well known in Washington, D.C. and Democratic circles. And for Vice President Bush, it was Lynn Martin, a congresswoman from Illinois, who went on to be his Secretary of Labor. So they had this lunch and they became friends. And I really didn't know that. They had a great time at lunch and they began to exchange little notes. Well, fast forward to 2008, and Joe Biden is going to debate Sarah Palin. And it will be the first debate between two major candidates. They were vice presidential candidates. And Jamie Gangel, then of the NBC Today Show, she's now on CNN, had the great idea of interviewing President Bush and Geraldine Ferraro to look back on what their debate was like in 1984. And they both said yes, but President Bush only said yes if Geraldine would come to Kennebunkport and hang out with him. So here she comes with her daughter and her grandson. And that's when I found out that they had this friendship. I didn't know. I had no idea they were friends. But her daughter Donna Zaccaro she was really, really helpful to me in putting this part of the book together. And because she had interviewed her mom before she died, had done a documentary. And one of the things, I did know this, but when Geraldine Ferraro was on her deathbed in 2011, we got word that she was dying. And President Bush wrote her this note. I often think of our strange but wonderful relationship, and I hope you know that I consider you a real friend. In fact, I hope it's okay that I say, I love you. So what I didn't know is that Donna told me, so President Bush's secretary put the letter in the mail, but because we knew that she was near death, we had an email address for someone, I think one of her staffers, and we emailed the note to them. And Donna told me this was the last thing read to her before she died, and that she cried. It was just a touching friendship, and what a great lesson for all of us. President Bush was really great at finding that common purpose in each of us. He knew how to find the good in everybody, but he also felt that we all have more in common than not. And I learned a lot watching him with Bill Clinton, Geraldine Ferraro, Bob Dole. They became very close. He always found that common purpose and became friends.
We could use so much more of that now. I mean,
Yeah.
that's such great lessons, and unfortunately, we're not seeing very much of that these days. But those are just wonderful stories. So many other great stories that you tell in the book happen in the summers in Kennebunkport, and everybody was there. First of all, it just sounded, I mean, they have a huge family anyway, so right, family was in and out, but then all of these incredible heads of states and celebrities and all kinds of people would just show up. So tell us what Summers in Kennebunkport were like?
It was bedlam. And you know, I love that I went to Maine every summer, but oh my gosh, it was the job was harder in Maine. Half the staff stayed in Houston. Only myself and the Bush's two personal aides went to Kennebunkport. And it was like running a cruise ship. It was like running a landlocked cruise ship. And the family, it's a huge family, and they came and went all summer, which was fun and wonderful. But I wrote this note to the staff back in Houston. I wrote this in August 20th, 1996. At last count, we had sailed past 100 house guests. Seriously. Among the luminaries have been Clarence Thomas, Lech Walesa, Freddie Couples, Billy Graham, and Richard North Patterson. I footnoted that and I said, in case people didn't know who they were, I said, so a Supreme Court justice, a Polish head of state, a golfer, a man of God, and an author. But you know, you can't get a more variety than that to go from Clarence Thomas, Lech Walesa, Billy Graham. Anyway, I continue in the note. We've had one cat, one rabbit, and several dogs. It was not a smart move on the part of anyone who brought these animals to do so. That would have been a pet peeve of Mrs. Bush. The numbers will continue to skyrocket next week with the arrival of the Oak Ridge boys and their wives. President Bush, that's just one little note. I wrote a lot of memos back to the staff in Houston. In fact, there's a memo right after that, right, with the subject line is complete nervous breakdown. We have grandkids eating things off trees. The local barber, Emil Roy, who sort of looks like Roy Orbison, wants to go out with me. The Bush's housekeeper is lost somewhere between here and Houston because her flight was canceled. The stupid restaurant where the Bushes are having dinner tonight is now called 4 times to make sure they have it right. President Bush's aide, John Carlo, wrecked one of President Bush's boats. Anyway, this sort of goes on and on. It was chaos, but what a wonderful chaos it was.
Well, and one of the things I'm so glad you read a couple of your memos because as you can all tell by now, Jean has a great sense of humor, which is I'm sure one of the reasons why you and President Bush got along so well. I'm sure he must have appreciated that about you, and you're a wonderful storyteller. And sprinkled throughout her book are memos that she would write to the staff and sometimes to her family. And there's another one that I really loved because this was a memo that you wrote to your staff during the 2000
Oh,
Republican convention when George W., number 43, was nominated for president. And both President 41 and Mrs. Bush had a problem, as you said, holding their tongues. So I think if you read that, we'll all figure out what the issue was there.
we got off to a really rocky start at the 2000 convention in Philadelphia, where George W. became the Republican Party nominee. President and Mrs. Bush, his parents were, our schedule was impossible. They did so many interviews, they visited so many delegations, they did so many events. They were incredibly busy, and it didn't necessarily go well. I wrote this note to the staff back in Houston. Less than 30 minutes after they arrived, George Bush made the now infamous statement to Jamie Gangel, the same Jamie Gangel, who I love, but is now banned from our office for life. And quote, this is what President Bush told her in an interview on the Today Show. In 30 days, I'm going to tell the American people what I really think of Bill Clinton as a human being. Obviously, the friendship had not begun yet. When he said it, I knew that life as we knew it was over. Yes, it caused a huge firestorm. Giancarlo, that's Giancarlo Pirasuti, who was President Bush's aide, Giancarlo and I were hounded by media, and we were afraid to leave our rooms. Karl Rove called and asked me what kind of dope I was smoking. Actually, that call came after the Good Morning America interview, which we scheduled to fix the Today Show mess, during which Barbara Bush announced that Al Gore had no character. At which point, President Bush turned to her on the air and said, "Okay, you're now in a hell of a lot more trouble than I was yesterday." Karen Hughes was one of George W.'s top aides, its top communication aide. Karen Hughes called too after that interview, and she was calling at the request of Governor Bush. That would be George W., who also wanted to know what we were smoking at our hotel. I wrote to the staff, "Don't tell the outside world, but the Bushes are now locked in the bathroom. The people you might see occasionally on TV pretending to be the Bushes are not them. They are character actors I have hired to play the part until November. Not only can I not trust them, but they cannot trust themselves. The problem is the mail is running 2-1 in their favor. Maybe I should let them out now." That was the end of my, and I have to tell you, Cheryl, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but one person while reading the book, emailed me and said, "Did you really lock the Bushes in the bathroom at the convention?" No, I did not. Anyway.
Well, I'm glad you set the record straight on that. They weren't actually
Yes.
your hostages in the bathroom. But when you read the book, people, you will see throughout, Jean is just shares so many wonderful memos that she wrote, and her great sense of humor, and her love for both President and Mrs. Bush. And they truly were such remarkable human beings, and your book just brings that out more. And they really had a, I would call it a very old fashioned sense of values, but they lived those
Good.
values every day. They didn't just talk the values, they lived them.
That's
And
right.
you have a I've said before, when I finished the book, it makes you want to be a better person. It really does. It makes you want to aspire to be as good as people as they were. So you have a really wonderful chapter. There's so many favorite chapters in mine in the book, but this was called Life Lessons and Things That You Learned from Them. And I'd love you to share some of those, and especially those you already talked about. What a big idea guy. I There's that word, idea. But especially thinking bigger, and you had some great examples of that too. So share some of those lessons.
Well, I learned so much again from watching him, and how he was never afraid of the big ideas, like uh, like inviting George Clooney to come, like going to Chichijima. I learned that if you don't reach for the stars, it's sort of like, why not? But one of the more important things I learned from them, Cheryl, particularly as I grow older, and I think we all are guilty as we grow older. I'm 65, and I think we all have a tendency to get set in our ways. And this is what we think, and this is what we're going to think. And I watch the Bushes, both of them, um, come come to understand and try to understand and change their mind about some of the big issues of our day. And President Bush and I talked a lot about it. One was same-sex marriage. He had some close friends who were gay. His last personal aide, Evan Sisley, is gay and is married, and the Bushes went to their wedding. They went to several same-sex weddings. And President Bush struggled with that issue. But at the end of the day, what he said to me was, and he actually said this to John Meacham when John Meacham was writing his book, Destiny and Power, everybody has a right to happiness. And we all have to keep our eyes and our mind open to everybody has a right to be happy. But I love watching them. It's like how he changed his mind about President Clinton and about the people in his life. I don't think a day went by that I did not learn something from him. At the very beginning of that chapter called Life Lessons, I actually wrote quickly. I decided to do a whole chapter on life lessons because there was so much. And the whole book has a lot of life lessons, but I wrote, what did I learn from George and Barbara Bush? My answer is typically quick and short. Think big, think of the other guy, make a difference, Don't be afraid to get into the ring. Live life with joy. But when I give real thought to the query, the answer is a little more complicated and more profound. Be open to new ideas. Ideas. Don't be afraid to change your mind. Don't be afraid to say you were wrong. Oh my God, that's just huge. Don't be afraid to say you were wrong. Don't judge. Don't hold grudges. He was just amazing. Um, we're running out of time, I'm afraid. And
Yeah, but
I
when
think
you
we
read
need,
those, they sound like such simple things, but they really did live those things,
they
and
lived
that
them.
was very, very
That's
big.
right. They lived
So
them.
before we've done really well on time. I'm amazed. I'm not quite sure how we did this, Jean, but we are. But there's another thing that I do want to talk about from the book because, as I said, you share so many wonderful stories about this man who most of us knew as a war hero and the president of the United States, but you really share how he made such a difference in his post presidency in the world. But you also share what the man was like, the private man, the friend, the mentor to so many people, and so many people that he friended that you said you would probably never have friended, and what he was able to see in other people. But there's one chapter that really got to me, and that's the chapter called Family First, because above
Right.
all, above everything, he definitely put family first. And in some of those, I think in his very first letter to himself, I think that we talked about after his post presidency, one of the things he wanted to do was to spend time with my grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of this, I'm a grandmother. This chapter so touched me. I'm sure a lot of us on the call tonight are grandmothers or mothers too. But he had a lot of grandkids. He has had such great relationships with every one of his grandkids, and he would write them letters. And there were two that I would love you to read because they really touched my heart. And one made me cry, and that was the letter he wrote to Christopher Buckley about fishing with his granddaughter. And then there's one that really made me laugh, and that was one that he wrote to his granddaughters, Jenna, Barbara, and Lauren, when they were in college. So if you could share those two, I know everyone will enjoy them.
So he wrote a letter to the great author and his great friend Christopher Buckley, and 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 Christopher specifically wanted him to talk about fishing. So I will just read parts of this. Dear Christo, as he called him, my new fountain boat slides and handles the big main seas with ease. My grandkids love it when we speed to our fishing waters. They get restless, though, if the mackerel doesn't bite. Come on, Gampy, let's go fast. They need to learn to calm down and to relax when we troll or cast. They need to learn the joy of just being out on the sea, watching the gulls, seeing the waves crash against the rocks, watching for a fish to break the waters. They need to grow up, but I don't really want them to do that. When my grandson Walker pulls in 4 squirming mackerel and starts yelling, I got 4. Look at what I caught, Gampy. That is heaven for me. I'm 74 now, but I don't feel old. I meditate a lot when I'm out fishing. I wonder how many more years I will have to fish with my sons and with my grandkids. I count my blessings of health and family. I want to keep on fishing. I want to teach Gigi, our youngest grandchild, now 2.5 years old, how to fish. When the fish aren't biting, I want to listen to her tell me what makes her happy and what makes her cry. We can start fishing next year. I won't tell her I was president. I'll just try to tell her about the wonders of life and have her understand that our family is what matters. Out on the boat, she's captive. She can squirm, but she can't hide. I will tell her I love her.
All right, I'm going to start crying again. So you have to read the funny letter now so
Okay.
I don't go
This
into
is
tears.
this is the funny one. This he wrote, subject is an email. Nervous grandfather is the subject line. March 9th, 2003. This went to Jenna and Barbara, the George W.'s twins, and to Lauren, Neil's daughter Lauren, now Lauren Bush Lauren. It is Sunday morning, and I'm at my duty station in the office. I'm worrying about 3 of my older granddaughters. Spring break causes the worry. I wonder, are all 3 off somewhere trying to go on wild college women TV show? Are they having a good time? Are they sticking near their 3 campuses so they can do, well, what I used to do during spring break back in the good old days, circa 1946, 47, 48? Namely, stick near the library. I found it was almost free of noise and people during spring break. Maybe you 3 have discovered the same thing. I'm here all week in Houston in case you need adult leadership. Despite these worries, maybe because of these worries, I love all 3 of you. Who says the Gampster can't be with it? Devotedly Gampy.
I just love that. So, Jean, I have to tell you, we have a lot of people writing in the chat box. You have a whole new fan club tonight because everyone is so delighted to hear your stories. You're a wonderful storyteller. So now we're going to try our little screen share. So, Jean has some wonderful pictures, and I hope this is going to work because she and I both admit we're not very good at the screen share thing. And I said, okay, I'm gonna do this. So what I want you to do, Jean, while I just stop my video and try to get the screen share, is to just, which I know you have no problem, chat, and I'll hopefully get the pictures up.
Okay.
Are we up?
Okay, we're up. That's the cover.
All right,
of the book.
let me get the from the beginning. Let's go. Oops. Slideshow from the beginning.
I was going to show these slides during our talk, but neither one of us were. Oh, so that's a picture. That's a picture from White House days. This is one of my favorite pictures. That's the First Lady of the United States. We're flying back from Denver, Colorado. We got back to the White House like at 3:00 in the morning. We had been to some charity fundraiser where they showed a 3D movie. So we all put on our 3D glasses. These are all Secret Service agents at the bottom. And I'm behind Mrs. Bush. That's her press secretary, Anna Perez, and her aide, Peggy. I love this photo. I always felt sorry for the agent who fell asleep.
This is a great one.
This is from January 20th, 1993. This is the Clintons arriving the White House. And I would love to know who President Bush is looking and smiling at. But President Clinton did something smart. He played with Millie the dog. That was a smart thing to do right off the bat. This is one of his many parachute jumps. This is before he had to start doing tandem jumps. I think this is his 75th birthday jump. This is his 75th birthday. I don't need to tell you who that is.
He's still our hearts.
This is proof that George Clooney came to Cameron, Louisiana. We don't care who any of these other people are. We just care who George Bush. I mean, are those 2 Georges not the cutest thing you've ever seen?
They are.
This is President Bush and President Clinton on their tsunami tour. This is in Sri Lanka. They're meeting with a group of school kids who their school was completely destroyed and they were going to school outside. Oh, we didn't get to this story. Y'all are going to have to read the book. This is President Bush driving, that would be Vladimir Putin, and then his son who's waving, the President of the United States. President George W. and Vladimir Putin had a bilateral meeting at Walker's Point. It's one of my favorite stories in the book. I almost got into big trouble during this visit, but I'll just say you're going to have to read the book. I will tell one quick story. I had a picture. There is a picture. I'm looking at it right now on my wall in Kennebunkport. I mean, my wall here in Houston in my office of me, President Bush, and Vladimir Putin. And I had a cable repairman here one day, and he's trying to talk to me about what's wrong with my cable. And he's looking at all the pictures on my wall. And he said, "Is that Vladimir Putin? Is that you with Vladimir Putin?" And I said, "Yes." And he looked at me and he said, "Who the hell are you?" This is a picture. The Bushes, they were just so much fun. This is they're racing on I can't remember what you call these. Um, they were very
I
popular
forgot
for a
to.
while.
Segways.
Thank
Segways,
you.
yes.
Whoever knew that, thank you. Segways. They're having a fake Segway race. There's actually a whole video. They did this whole fake Olympics, which CBS sports announcer Jim Nantz showed on CBS. This is their Segway race. They were just fun. This is President Bush shaving his head. This is the son of a Secret Service agent who had leukemia. Little Patrick lost all his hair, so his dad shaved his head to support his son. President Bush's entire Secret Service detail, except for the two women, shaved their head to support their colleague whose son had leukemia. And President Bush decided to shave his head. It was quite, this picture went viral. It went all over the world and it raised so much money for cancer. And I'm happy to tell you that little Patrick is now 12 years old and has the biggest head of curly hair you've ever seen.
That's a great ending.
This is just the whole, this is the Bush family. I think this is Mrs. Bush's 90th birthday. Just a picture of the whole family getting together.
Wow. Well, Jean, I'm so glad that worked because those photos are so wonderful and you have so many more of them in the book. And I just have to say, this has just been such an extraordinary evening with you. I just can't thank you enough. And to the book again, everyone, if you haven't already bought and read the book, you must go out. You must leave this tonight and go immediately to Amazon. Who aren't my favorite people right now for another reason, but go to Amazon or wherever you buy books, get this book. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to just, as I said, feel inspired, hear the stories of this man in a way you've never heard before. And as I said, leave feeling you want to be a better person. You want to be like they were, just kind, amazing, generous people. So, Jean, do you have time for any questions?
If somebody has a question, absolutely. I know some people are probably starving, but if people want to ask questions, I would like to make an offer. If you would like a book plate, if you get the book and want a book plate, I'm a little behind, but when you just let Cheryl or someone know that you would like a book plate, and I'm happy to put one in the mail to you. But it might be when you least expect it, it will show up in your mailbox.
Well, that's one that is really wonderful. So if I can figure this out in chat, if anyone has a question, put that in chat or come off mute. You could come off mute now and just kind of raise your hand.
I will. Someone asked if the book was on Audible. It is. There is an audio version of the book. And my best friend, George Dvorsky, reads all the letters and memos from President Bush, which is really fun. He's an actor, singer, and he just does a great job. The Bushes wanted me and George to get married. They were obsessed with it. There was one little problem. George is gay. And we would tell the Bushes, remind the Bushes of that. And President Bush once said, "Well, how gay is he?" And I said, but George adored them. And he reads a part of President Bush, which is nice.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And I'll save all these chats for you, Jean, because there's just such wonderful, beautiful comments here. Someone said how I wish we could go back in time. Those were some of the best days I remember in history, good and bad, such earnest values. I don't want you to stop talking. We've had 18 ideas so far. Someone counted up all of our ideas. Whoa, okay.
We had 18 ideas. Thank you, Margot, for counting.
Someone else said, Jean and
So
Cheryl,
Peggy
great job.
I,
Jean, it's great to see you on Zoom. So I
thank
just
you.
can't thank you enough, Jean, for sharing all of this with us. I think it's been, I should say this, our most delightful book event. And I will
Oh,
say that because you're just fabulous. And I thank all of you for coming here tonight and being part of it. And sign up for our newsletters if you haven't, and you'll find out about more great, not only virtual events, but we're now back this fall doing live events in New York City. So we're so excited about that. So, Jean, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody. Have a
All
great
right.
evening.
Great evening.